I've always admired people that repair things, especially electronics. I find myself envious of those that buy cheap, faulty versions of things, and with a few turns of a screwdriver and a blob of solder, are able to make it as good as new. I'd love to be able to do that. I've fiddled with a few things in the past, but I want to challenge myself to something bigger. Despite my first gaming memories coming from playing PS1 and Mega Drive, and then owning a PS2 for many years, I perhaps look back most fondly at the PS3. During that generation, I became so much more interested in gaming as a whole, rather than just playing games I enjoyed. It probably helped that around that same time we first got internet in our home too, so I was able to find out much more about so many different games. I would spend hours each day posting in forums, learning and sharing everything there was to know about upcoming games, and making friends. I would go on to get my first taste of online multiplayer gaming with those new friends too. The slightly hazy memories I have of cruising around Paradise City with a few mates, having a laugh on our painful Bluetooth headsets are some of my favourite. Add that to a bunch of great single-player games I played over those years too, and the PlayStation 3 might just be my favourite console so far. So let's try to revive a big part of those days, my launch model PlayStation 3 that suffered the yellow light of death. Having already removed the smart plate, I got to work unscrewing the top cover. The guide I was using didn't mention two smaller screws that also needed to be removed at this point, but eventually I figured it out and got it off. I'm always nervous when disconnecting these sorts of connectors, because they're so tightly slotted in there, and the best way to be able to pull them out is yanking on the wire, which never feels great, and most people say you shouldn't do it that way, but usually it's the only way to be able to pull hard enough. Ribbon cables are scary too, since they can be so fragile. But anyway, that's the Blu-ray drive out. After this little control board came out, I finally figured out I should remove this other ribbon cable that was keeping the top cover attached. Now it's much easier to work with. And then I removed all the screws holding the mainboard assembly in place. The guide directed me to simply lift out the assembly from the bottom cover. Simple was not the word I would use. After a long time of attempting to lift, pry, twist and rotate the thing out of there, I found the actual simple solution was to flip the assembly upside down and simply lift the bottom cover off. The next step was removing the back panel. The connector of the ground wire would not come free, and after a few more minutes of frustration, I figured it was the power supply blocking its escape. Before I took out the power supply though, I first removed the card reader board, which I had to improvise a bit with as it looked different than in the guide. I removed the card reader and Bluetooth receiver as a connected unit, as the Bluetooth wire seemed very thin and delicate and I didn't want to risk unplugging it. A few simple screws and the power supply was out, and the back panel was free. Getting to the business end now, and it's time to remove the heatsink and fan. Just two brackets to unscrew and a firm pry away from the mainboard, and there you have it. Just a few more screws and both halves of the mainboard cover were removed. The final step before the reflow fun can begin is cleaning off the old thermal paste with the world's worst alcohol wipes. Sadly, I didn't get footage of my actual reflowing of the mainboard, as I was far more concerned with actually doing it properly instead of filming it. But all I did was lightly warm the whole board before concentrating on the four main areas for 30 seconds each. I then had to wait around 30 minutes for the board to cool off. Apply new thermal paste and put it all back together, and it's ready to see if I've somehow brought this old thing back to life. We have a red light, so it's not completely dead. Now the question is, has the yellow light been fixed? It's gotten further than it used to. No video though. I guess the only thing left to try is potentially resetting the video output. I may have last used this on a standard definition TV, now it's hooked up via HDMI. So to do that I just press and hold the power button for 5 seconds, so fingers crossed again, let's go. There's one beep. There's a second beep, which apparently resets the display. Let's see, do we get anything? Still no. Final test now. I've swapped out the HDMI cable. You'll see I just pulled that one out of a drawer. I have no idea if it even works. So let's try again. I'll do the 5-second thing again. What do we have? Nothing. That's really peculiar. Oh! Something. Okay. I got so distracted scrolling through all the old files that I forgot to record myself actually testing the functionality of the system. I quickly realised it wasn't accepting discs. I wondered for a moment if I should even bother opening up the Blu-ray drive itself to try and fix the problem. I felt like I was getting in over my head. I decided to give it a try though, as I couldn't make it any worse than it already was. Well, I managed to get it to a point where it will accept discs, although rather arduously. Ah, smooth. However, the console will not read them. I did open it back up again to troubleshoot further why the disc wasn't being read. The disc wouldn't spin once it was in there. And reading online, that means it's either the motor or the laser that have died, and that's where I really have to draw the line. Sadly, I'm going to have to leave this system living again, but without the ability to play games from a disc. But that's not what this project was about. It wasn't just about making my old console functional again. Yes, had it worked perfectly, I would have been ecstatic. But given that some people say this reflow repair is only good for a few months, I probably wouldn't have wanted to play games on it for an extended period of time anyway. Doing this repair expanded my knowledge of devices like this, allowed me to feel really clever when I was fiddling with all the different bits, and ultimately it was a lot of fun. That feeling when turning it on for the first time and the light stayed green, and the feeling when the display sprung to life, and the feeling of scrolling through that old cross-media bar, seeing the files I'd left behind, the messages, the memories. I didn't realise it before I started, but it's those feelings that are my big payoff from this repair. It doesn't change the fact that the motivation for this repair did come from my desire to go back to some of my old PS3 games and try out some I'd missed. The slim model I've had since my first console died is showing its age too. It really doesn't like reading discs. So I've bought a second-hand super slim model from eBay. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.